Hey, it's me, Rob Ryan. I am back with another amazing conversation of entrepreneurial thinkers. I got to talk everything climate tech, climate innovation, climate venture capital investments, clean energy, green energy, all through the lens of the European continent, the old world. So if you're curious about how we're bridging the new world, the Western Hemisphere, South America, Latin America, and the US with the old world, the European continent, the European Union, and its stalwart economies like Spain, Italy, Germany, and beyond, this is a conversation you want to enjoy. I got to sit down and have a conversation between Los Angeles and Madrid with my old friend Fernando, otherwise known as Fernando De Larrea, a one-time very prominent early days investor and venture capitalist in Mexico, who has now set up a new fund with new partners and is building in the climate, green, clean energy, climate technology, hard sciences space in Europe from Spain. Super exciting conversation. Grateful for his time and energy. We covered the range of comparisons and contrasts with Europe and the new world, so to speak. And we talked about the unique opportunity that he and his fund and his firm have to bridge those worlds because of a lot of the relationships that he has, but more importantly, as founders, as creators, as storytellers in our mid-50s, we also spent some time talking about just the journey that he's been on that has found him reinventing himself now at this point in his life from Spain, and how refreshing and energizing that experience has been, while also being a humbling journey that he is learning from constantly. So it's an amazing, very personal, very human, very vulnerable conversation filled with insights, filled with deep analysis from the point of view of a really, really smart economist who is shepherded along by just a conversationalist like me. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as we did making it for you.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And as you may or may not be aware, this is the show where I get to have weekly conversations with some of the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry as we come together to try to leave this world just a little bit better than we found it. Today, I'm super excited. I'm grateful, actually, to be joined by an old friend from Mexico in a new way today, Fernando Lelo De Larrea, founder and managing partner at Rumbo Ventures in Spain, where he's joining us from tonight. Let me tell you a little bit about him before we meet him, and then we're going to dive into a really wide-ranging conversation about a whole bunch of things around venture, private capital, Europe related to Latin America, climate tech. I mean, we're gonna pull a whole bunch of things apart today. But let me tell you about Fer first. He is not just a venture capitalist, in my opinion. He's an ecosystem builder. He's a teacher, fundamentally at his core, and I believe he is an entrepreneurial thinker. He's been one of the key figures responsible for lighting up Latin America's startup revolution over the past decade. He could easily be teaching a university class one day and launching a new fund the next, because actually he's already done both. He's the founding partner of Rumbo Ventures, a firm that is not just investing in scalable startups, but in the future of the region itself. He brings 2 decades of unique experience across private equity, venture capital, and impact-driven innovation. And he's helped shape companies that have touched millions, from fintech companies like Flink to food tech companies like Robin Food to climate tech powerhouses like Enlight. He did co-found one of Latin America's first institutional VC funds in Mexico, and he's now investing on the continent, or in the old world, as we'd say, in Europe. He's raised funds, taught aspiring entrepreneurs at university, advised governments, scaled real estate companies, and he's even worked in energy project finance way back in the day before climate tech was even a buzzword. So today we're not just talking about venture capital, we're talking about what it means to bet on people, on purpose, and on place. And this is going to be a conversation about vision, values, risk, and building sustainable future for our kids. And now, hey, Abuelo Rob here, our grandkids and what they deserve. So it's a great honor to say, welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers Fair. It's so great to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for that beautiful introduction. I'm touched and moved and excited about this conversation we're going to have.
My pleasure. And happy Friday to you all. For all the future listeners, whenever they listen, whenever we release this episode, I will tell you it's Friday morning in LA and it's Friday evening in Madrid. So it's probably me standing in the way of Fair being out with his family, really enjoying the city or something tonight.
Fascinated to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so here we go. I've got one big question to kind of kick us off.
Yes.
And then we're going to get into a deep, wide-ranging conversation. But this is one of the things that kind of got my attention as I was thinking about booking you and getting you on the show. And then as I was preparing the script for this episode is, I'm curious, you write a lot about this. You talk a lot about this online. So tell us, why is Europe so ready to invest in and build out climate solutions?
Yes, that's something that has been taking a big part of my mind lately. As you said, I've been writing about it, and the reason I write about it is really because I have to put my ideas together in understanding and in really convincing myself and in arguing with investors and with policymakers and with everybody about this moment. I am not a European. I'm Mexican. I moved to Spain only 3 years ago. And in fact, I moved here at the beginning to take a sabbatical. That was the origin of it. I said, I'm just going to take some time off after, the last run at OVP. Let's see what I can offer my family here. And then I started realizing that there was a big opportunity here. And let me tell you how I came to it and then what I have been finding later on. What I found is, or the origin of it was, I really want to take the next step in my career, the next 20 years, getting back to something that gives me purpose, that it's really impactful, that is going to change the world and leave it as a better place for my kids and my grandkids, as you briefly said. That was really what I wanted to do. And that was also the origin of my initial entrance into venture capital, because I thought that venture capital would have a big impact on economic development for economies in Latin America. And that proved to be right. But then after many years, it started to get eroded and harder to get. So I really wanted to say, I really want to solve a big problem. Then I started talking with my kids, because now I'm at a later stage and my kids were getting ready for college. And my daughter was like, I don't know what I want to study. So let's discuss what are the problems that you want to solve in the world. And climate was just at the top of the list of any kid on that generation. They're so aware of how big a threat for humanity is, how influential it is for many decisions they're taking, and it really started making me pay attention to it. I had invested in some climate companies before, as you mentioned, but it wasn't with this sense of this is the biggest problem to tackle.
Right.
Then I started. I'm a nerd, and I really go deep into studying these things. And I really started studying this, and I realized, and there's a very interesting study from McKinsey, labeling how much money is going to be moved into the private and the public sector towards fighting climate change and reaching the net zero goals of the Paris agreements. And it's just, we're talking about massive amounts of money, but we're talking about trillions of dollars to be mobilized every year in order to reach those goals. And it's really the biggest movement of capital that I have ever seen in 5 decades. I'm like, this is really interesting. There's going to be this massive movement of money in order to reach this global agreement that we need to do this to preserve humanity by 2050. And the tools that are needed for this they're very dependent on having financial skills to solve them.
Yeah.
And then I came with an insight saying, first, on a very Steve Jobs-like approach, saying, I'm going to connect the dots backwards. I've done venture capital for many years, but before that, I was doing structured finance when I was doing real estate. Before that, I was doing project finance. And you need all these things in order to finance what comes next, because what comes next has to do with atoms. We have to build things that solve this problem. It is not only about digital world. We really have to build things, and those things need to be financed. And that might require this stack of financial knowledge that I might dust off and try to bring to use.
I'm curious. Excuse me for interrupting you. So I'm curious, right? So you read the McKinsey study, and I'm just going to assume the McKinsey study is global, right?
Yeah.
So it's looking at the world as a whole, inclusive of the United States, Europe, Asia, Africa, et cetera, et cetera. Here you are. You've quickly learned, if I'm hearing, you're terrible at sabbaticals.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
learning,
Terrible sabbatical.
you're terrible at sabbaticals, but a great dad, right?
Yeah.
So you're listening to your daughter. She's getting ready for university. She's got obsessed with the climate and how it's going to affect
Yes.
her life, right?
Yes.
And so now you're seeing this juxtaposition of these pieces moving around this puzzle board, and while you're studying this and while you're sitting down in front of your computer to write out your beautiful essays that you share with us every couple of weeks on Substack, like are you realizing like I'm sitting in Spain, like I'm sitting in the old world. Like, is this the best place to be for this massive transfer of money or not? And then you discovered something.
Yes. So that's exactly right. I see three things. First, I say this is happening mostly in Europe. Somehow we can talk more about this. The US has politicized this debate. Europe is taking it very seriously because Europe is very dependent on international trade and the relationship with Russia and so on for its energy. So Europe is very worried about its own survival and climate, and some more advanced countries like Nordics are taking big steps on this. So things are happening in Europe that is great for learning. Number one. Two, what I said, this is what is going to be needed is something that I can really bring to the table. And three, and this was what really made me move into this, is I spent the last 15 years raising money all around the world for Latin America. And when you go to Sand Hill Road and you talk to an institutional investor, and you say, listen, these are the things that are happening in Mexico. This is super interesting, and you should take a look at the e-commerce and blah, blah, blah. And the key question is, okay, so you're asking me to go out and travel, which I don't like. I don't like even crossing Sand Hill Road, and take a FX risk and political risk, and you're perhaps giving me some alpha on it. It's not clear that you're giving me any alpha for becoming international. So why would I go and invest in Latin America if I can get the same results by investing in Palo Alto, right?
Okay.
And that was a conversation that I had all the time. And then you can argue why it was great to do Latin America, but you wouldn't convince everybody about that.
Yeah.
When you are talking with a person in Norway and you're saying, listen, brilliant person, very advanced and clean and whatever, Norway is reaching 100% electrical cars by 2030, and all this reduction of emissions that you're getting in Norway have no purpose because you're only exporting your emissions to Brazil or to Mexico or to India or to China or to Indonesia or whatever. If this is not a global movement, we're not going to reach the goals. This is not a zero-sum game. We really have to do it all together. So any money that you're spending in Europe, you really have to spend it all around the world. So if you want to really achieve net zero, you have to have a climate movement all around the world. And you have to have flags in Latin America, and you have to have flags in Southern Europe and Africa.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're not going to reach it. So the money becomes much more international, and it's indispensable that we make it an international movement, because otherwise, if only Europe succeeds in this, we're not going to reach net zero.
So there's less of that geocentric protectionism, words, right?
Yeah.
The comfort zone of the Silicon Valley investor who says, like, I don't need to go anywhere else because I can get everything I need to here, because of the nature of the complexity and the pervasiveness of the problem.
Right. And because we're solving a problem, it's not about maximizing returns only.
Yeah. And then the European component, or you're sitting in Spain, but some of the different is again unique because of almost some of its own self-interest, whether those be like literal national security interests or what they might be. But like this idea that, wait a minute, like we have to pay attention to doing this better, because right now for our old world energy, we're depending upon malevolent actors that we don't trust anymore.
Correct.
Okay.
So
what an interesting confluence of circumstances to it.
Right. And then in addition to that, about a third of the reduction of CO2 emissions, according to several studies, will come from technologies that are not already in place. So you have 2/3 that are, we need to advance solar and wind, and we need to go into electrical cars. And yeah, there's some things that are gaining some track, and you need to finance them, and then we need the infrastructure, we need debt and all that. But then about 1/3 of the CO2 reduction that we need in order to achieve Paris Accord and net zero has to come from technologies that have not been commercially developed. So venture capital plays a huge role on this. When you talk about venture capital as a whole in the financial sector, we can talk about a lot about that, and it's exciting and it's very popular, but it's a tiny fraction of the financial sector.
Sure. Yeah.
But when we're talking about climate, new technologies is 1/3 of it. So we need massive amounts of venture capital to be mobilized into it. And when I'm talking about massive amounts, you might have these numbers clearer than me, but perhaps in all of Latin America, aside from the bizarre years of 2020 and 2021, but it's in the order of $2 to $3 billion a year in venture capital in the region as a whole. Here we're talking about hundreds of billions in venture capital that need to be deployed per year in order to enhance the technologies that we know we are going to be needing in the years to come.
Yeah. Wow.
And then the argument is, okay, but we are in 2025. Paris Accord is promising net zero by 2050. The US has left the table, so are we really going to reach net zero? And that's an interesting discussion, but in my view, it's all incremental. Every ton of CO2 that we reduce from the earth is gonna give us more time as a
I mean, this is like the ultimate non-zero sum game. I mean, like this is the, hey, it's far better for us to have made incremental progress towards the goal that we may or may not get to than to just sit here and go, well, we're not going to make it to the goal, so let's not do anything.
Right. And that's why, and again, we might discuss this later on, it's absurd how politicized that this can be.
And we will get to that. Yeah, we'll talk more about that. We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney and Company. You know, we all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney and Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory. In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney and Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com. That's HaneyCPAs.com to learn how they can support your business's financial journey. You teased a couple of things I'm curious about. I'm going to ask you kind of a follow-on here. So, right, as I do my background research at Rumbo, you guys invest in 7 different sectors. And so for me, because we did just talk about this idea that like 1/3 of the carbon removal is going to have to come from stuff that, like, just my words, like hasn't even been created yet. So I'm curious, right? Like, of the 7 sectors that you invest in, kind of which are maybe a couple angles on this? Which are the most obvious low-hanging opportunities that you see? But then maybe conversely to that, what are 1 or 2 of these sectors that you see like are absolutely key to society over the next 50, 75 years?
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I've been changing my mind about that. The more the good thing is I am learning like crazy. And this is exciting, Rob. After 20 years doing venture capital in Latin America, you start to get to know the business models and things start to become a little predictable. In this world, it's like, what I know is that the best things are things that I just don't know and don't understand yet. Because first, I'm not a technical guy. I'm an economist. So I don't have a background in physics or engineering or anything. But but I try to read a lot and understand where are the trends. So this is what I can tell you. These 7 sectors that you define are, in my mind, take the whole economy. This is about everything that we do, how we move, how we generate energy, how we build stuff, how we consume things, so all the aspects. So I tend to think of climate not as a vertical, as you would call fintech, but more as an approach to investing in everything that puts together
in
the
everything.
economy. So
Okay.
really, when the 7 sectors that you mentioned is energy, how we power things, so electricity and how we electrify most of what we do, and how do we make the electricity go clean, and what are the effects of AI and data centers in terms of the needs of electricity in the world and the grids. And there's lots of interesting things there, including nuclear, including fusion, geothermal. So interesting things happening there. Then how we move, mobility, transportation, how we electrify cars, but how are we gonna make aviation more efficient with alternative fuels? How are we gonna make boats more efficient with hydrogen, for instance? So really all kinds of transportation. This is a big chunk of emissions. Then how we build things. Then how to abate industries, cement, steel, aluminum, plastics, and then everything related to food in terms of agro and in terms of the food sector and food tech, and then water and waste and circular economy, and then there's a big component that is also interesting to talk about, which is carbon capture. How are we going to net that emissions? Because this is something that people might not be fully aware of, but we have been seeing a spectacular growth in renewables all around the world, including the US. There's a massive entrance of solar and wind power generation. Well, all that solar, 100% of the solar and wind capacity that has been installed in the world have only been able to catch up with the increase of demand. That is, 100% of the base of whatever we consumed 20 years ago is still being powered by fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Natural gas, oil, coal. So we are still very much dependent, 80% dependent on fossil fuels for power generation all around the world. And that's not going to go to zero in 20 years.
Right.
What we need is to make that clean, even if we're burning coal, even if we're burning gas. And those technologies are very interesting. In my view, to answer your question, that's where I think we're going to have the biggest effect. It is not about what can we do cleaner, but how do we do what we're doing now become cleaner?
I love this. First of all, the analogy for me, this idea of it being this horizontal layer across everything. As I was listening to you articulate that, I immediately had flashbacks to the mid '90s, and I thought about the internet.
Yeah,
right. Because
exactly.
that's often how we spoke about the internet back in the mid '90s, was that it was going to be this new layer of technology that was going to essentially automate or internet digitize everything that already existed. Right.
Yes.
And I've not heard as many different climate people as I talked to on all different ends of it. And I actually just interviewed a young entrepreneur, with a solar, like, installation and services company from Mexico, for a future episode that'll come out somewhere in the coming weeks. Awesome story. Solfium was the company. Andres was the founder.
Yes,
Great story. Great, fantastic guy. But even as I'm talking to all these really smart people, I've never heard anybody kind of describe it that way, which so easily resonates with me, because then it makes it less like it's like this specific sector, as you said, like compared to fintech, compared to this, compared to that. And instead it just says, no, this is essentially just like in a new, my words, like a new operating system layer that has to go across all industry, every aspect of everything we do in life, industrially, humanly today, has to be climatized. Again, my words, right? Like,
yeah. No, but that's exactly right. And then let me tell you the last piece related to Europe. So Europe has been, as you know, super concerned about lagging behind the U.S. in terms of productivity and economic growth. And I'm an economist, and that I understand, as opposed to technologies I don't understand thing.
Yeah.
But this is something interesting, and I've been a little critical on saying might not be so true. There's good explanation on why the U.S. has created this gap vis-a-vis Europe in terms of economic size or GDP per capita. A lot of it related to fracking and the oil that the U.S. has found by itself.
Yeah.
But Europe is worried about competitiveness and productivity, and then there's this famous Draghi report. I'm sure you've seen it. Draghi was the former head of the European Central Bank, an Italian that very influential, and he launched this report that is saying Europe has to regain competitiveness through its industry.
Okay.
And
kind of a bit of a clarion call that got everybody's attention amidst a bunch of other geopolitical realities.
Yeah, but this is something that has been talked a lot about in Europe. It's the Draghi report. We really have to concentrate in regaining the competitiveness in European industries. And my thesis is that competitiveness will go through industrial decarbonization. That is, in my mind, we can no longer think of climate as a cost that we have to pay in order to survive. And we have to pay a green premium. We are dependent on subsidies. Governments have to finance this because this is something that will cost us because otherwise we will die. This is, we are going to make more competitive industries because a lot of money is being poured into cleaning our industries, and that brings the leapfrogging in the efficiency of our technologies. And that is a big change. And that makes it for a very industrial approach to what we're doing, which in opposition to the B2C kind of investments that I used to do, this is completely different.
Yeah. And this is enterprise level stuff, right? I mean, exactly. I've said I'm none of the things you are. I'm not an economist. I'm not a venture capital investor. I'm the greatest generalist in the history of generalists, right? But and now I sit here behind a microphone and try and tell these stories and amplify these conversations. But my point is, for 20 years, I've been theorizing and asking almost rhetorically and waiting for somebody to tell me what you just said, which is, why are we not making the climate change / green economy, clean economy investment, whether it's public investment or private investment, like, why are we not making this investment argument about economic growth? It was screaming at me. And I thought to myself, again, like, you know, we went through industrialization and that it did away with the horses and the buggies, but it replaced it with things that then created huge economic opportunity. And then we went through a period of digitization and growth through software and technology that you and I both lived through. And that it decimated certain things and moved them off the shelf. And then it replaced it with all new things. And I've always thought that. So to hear you say that is both kind of quietly validating, but also very exciting to me, because I think tell me if I'm wrong, I think that's the only way that this argument can be made across all political interests.
Absolutely.
To become accepted standard, okay, this is it. We have to all get in the boat and do this.
Yeah. And again, the political narrative might deviate attention and create some noise, but at the end, everybody has to understand this. And this is what we're seeing. Let me put you an example. If a Tesla, bad example because it's politicized already, but an electrical car
a Rivian or a Polestar or something, or a BYD from China.
If that car has an independence of kind of make up numbers of 200 kilometers or 300 kilometers, and then we have a technological breakthrough in the way we produce the anodes of the batteries, and that becomes 1,000 kilometers for the same volume of battery, that is climate, because that's a technological improvement that makes batteries more efficient, that makes cars much more attractive, that the amortization of cars, and then a faster transition into electrical cars because you need less stations. And that is the kind of things that we're excited about.
Wow.
People tend to think of climate, and I'm just going to caricaturize this a little bit, but people think of it, let's avoid plastics in
100%.
And it's
Yeah.
it's all about consumers changing their behavior in order to save the
Yep.
planet. But this is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is how do we make what we do, which is how do we eat, how do we move, how do we build, with less emissions. And we in most of the cases we already know how to do it. We just have to bring the technology in order to do that. And whoever does that, whoever comes out with a battery for cars that increases tenfold the independence of a car, is going to have a huge economical impact on that economy.
Huge.
And that's going to
Yeah.
become a big company, and those are the kind of unicorns and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So that's the research that is happening in labs all around the world, and that's where Europe stands out, because Europeans have always, and this is counterintuitive in the narrative that we have been hearing the last 10 years, but Europeans have always had very competitive researchers, PhDs, innovation labs. For sure. Universities in Europe are among the best in the world. R&D labs. What was missing, and where Europe is not perceived as the US, is that we don't have, or Europe, I say we, but Europe doesn't have the Amazons and the Facebooks and this mega big companies.
Right.
Because the nature of the financial sector is different, and the M&As are different, and the financing is different, but the innovation competes face to face with the US. And so now that this is paramount to the survival of Europe from a geopolitical perspective, from an energy independence perspective, from a competitiveness perspective, and you have all the money being put into this, including money from the US that is avoiding this turmoil in the US, I think we're going to be seeing many of the breakthrough technologies happening here.
It's interesting. This is all fascinating. Thank you. It jumps off at me as I'm listening to you is one of the inherent advantages of Europe, right? Saying it that way, is the fact that even where there might be little bursts of politicization of the issues in a particular country or for a particular moment, it still is a collective of X number of different countries that that have complementary but different, who are already like decades into this collaborative unity, communion, and kind of union with each other, right? So whereas the U.S. can like shut itself off as we go through our own discord and uncertainty here, but if Poland, if one party tries to rise up against green innovation in Poland, they could maybe subsist for a while, but the rest of Europe is still carrying the water, and that's almost an like a healthy insulation from some of the factors that might otherwise. Basically, I don't believe any of these factors, even including with what's going on in the U.S. right now. I don't think any of them win in the grand scheme of things the way that they think they do. I think all they do is they just delay and obfuscate, right? So yes. what the thesis you've postulated for all of us as a species, right, on the planet, because the planet's going to last. So I've always said, like, that mythology of like, we just marketed this whole thing wrong, like 40, 50 years ago, right? It wasn't about saving the planet. It was about saving our ability to live on the planet in the manner that we become accustomed to.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. Like, because the planet's like, hey, I'm going to be here for 20 million years. Like, you guys may not last as a species on here, but I'm going to be here. Right. So this idea that like, it's inevitable, right? It's not to dive into politics, but right. We're going through a very tumultuous time in the U.S. and immigration and the debates about the nationalism and all that stuff are stoking all kinds of foment. And I always say that, like, really what's happening is we're just experiencing the last dying gasp breaths of those trying to hold on to the way it used to be, because the demographic changes and the inevitable kind of remaking of what the country looks like is inevitable, right? So it has a time certain date on it that's going to happen. And all they're doing is really just delaying the inevitable. I feel the same way and have felt the same way about climate forever. Like, it's not a either or, this is true, this isn't true. No, it's true. You may not believe it, and that's going to be your fault. That's going to be your problem. Like, literally, this is true. So it's very exciting to me to hear you kind of which is going to lead to a question I've got for you here in a second, like, to hear you so aggressively place yourself out in front of this in agreement with this, right? Because you've awoken to this reality of like this inevitability. That's very exciting. So let me ask a question, and then we kind of keep going here. So because what's an interesting juxtaposition, this is a bit more of a personal question about you, is like, I know you and your old partners, right? And you guys were all very kind of sector agnostic, right? And so now I'm curious, was the previous sector agnosticism mostly just due in part to the fact that like Mexico and South America's economies were so newborn, and everything had to grow, and there was opportunities everywhere, that you guys had to look through this like wider lens? Or were there other reasons that you guys, I don't want to diminish your intelligence, right? Like, were there other reasons that you guys decided that back then it was just smartest to be super sector agnostic?
No, that's super interesting. And I think it's a little bit of both. We thought at the time, so we started all between 2011 and end of 2011. This was very early on.
People didn't even know how to spell venture capital in Latin
right.
America in 2011.
And I see it from the demand side and from the supply side. From the supply side, that is from the people that would give you money. You will come and say, listen, I'm going to make a fund on venture capital. Let me explain you what that asset class is and why it should exist. And by the way, that tiny asset class that doesn't exist, I'm going to take a slice of it because I'm going to invest only on fintech or whatever. It was going to be very hard to convince people to give us money for that on the supply side, on the LP side. And then there were very few companies out there to invest in. But the motivation, and I think this we got right, was we want for innovation to be a driver of economic growth in Latin America, and venture capital is a component that needs to exist. And we have seen that whatever has happened, because we didn't invent venture capital at all in Latin America, what has happened before tends to be with an argument of, oh, but things in Latin America have to be different. And we said, no, there's some best practices of doing this asset class. They happen in Silicon Valley. We're going to bring whatever works best in the world to Latin America. We're going to stick to best practices. And that was sort of what we were bringing to the table and saying, this asset class will work in an economy like Mexico and Latin America because it's large enough, and we're going to create business, economic development through this. So the passion was on that.
Okay. So it was, like we're raising all boats. Like
right,
you saw yourselves as catalysts for broad economic growth.
Yeah. And we didn't know what we were doing, to be completely honest. And we were just, but then as 10 or 13 or 14 years later, it is now time to specialize. And now you have to be really good at something that, because of competition, because of the depth of the market and so on. And even my former partners have specialized very brightly so on artificial intelligence, and they're doing it brilliantly. And I'm taking a different stand, very much influenced by what I did before OVP, which had to do with other parts of finance. Mm-hmm.
No, I love it. Thank you. Cause that's been kind of, again, as I'm putting myself into your lives in this context, but as friends, right? Like having watched you guys and know both of you and have watched you evolve over the years from the outside, that question has always been a curiosity of mine. So that's fascinating. I have to ask one last personal question, and then I want you to
sure.
Next, we're going to talk all about Rumbo. I want you to kind of tell us about Rumbo and the profile and all that stuff. But we are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Shore Capital. In today's venture capital world, it's not just about cash. It's about relationships. Capital is harder to find, limited investors have fewer managers that they can trust, and the industry is just filled with far too much hype. Shore Capital is an early-stage venture fund investing in the world's most ruthlessly iterative founders, helping its limited partners to find founders who are solving the world's most dynamic problems, teams that excel in mastering the idea maze, teams moving with a rapid, iterative velocity and demonstrating radical resourcefulness. Shore Capital doesn't just write checks, though. They become fractional co-founders when needed, offering strategic support, high-leverage relationship development, and a deep commitment to the long-term success of their portfolio companies. If you are a ruthlessly iterative founder with a bold vision or a limited investor seeking sustained access to the brightest, big thinkers of our time, Shore Capital wants to meet you. So visit shorecapital.notion.site to learn more. One last personal question. You explained already, obviously, you initially moved as a result of like a desire to have a sabbatical, a change in perspective for you, for your family, et cetera. Okay, that I get that, right? You live a comfortable, good life in your business and in your life in Mexico. I'm mostly going to ask this question less about now the personal, but more about like the fact that you are now not on sabbatical. You found your way into being re-engaged in the world that you are.
As you said, I suck at sabbaticals because I really
exactly
rapidly moved into this, and many people told me, respect your sabbatical, don't rush into things.
You're like, nope, too late. I'm terrible at that. Yes. So it's funny because I was going to ask this question differently, but you made it so clear about the initial reason for why you went there. So now I'm more curious, like now that you're there and you're re-engaged with your work again, has that transition been difficult? Right. And I'll say more specifically because like it's difficult to relocate and build new relationship networks and build. Or has it been less difficult for you in part because you are in Rumbo as a proxy for you, but you're kind of acting as a bit of a bridge between the old world and the new world. Like you're still like leaning on your relationships in Mexico City, in Silicon Valley, everywhere else. And you just happen to be in Spain. Or has it been difficult because you have to then build now new credibility in Spain and in Italy and in Germany and in London?
Yeah. No, it's been harder than what I anticipated. I didn't have any network in Spain. I don't have a family here, or an extended family. I mean, I didn't have a lot of previous relationships. A few with some venture capitalists and some entrepreneurs, but very, very, very little. And it was hard for me to tap into my Mexican network at that time. So I had to really reinvent myself. And for good or for bad, I was a known name in Mexico, and that would open me doors, and people would refer me. And here I'm like, there's this guy that I met that is Mexican, that he's trying to do climate, and
right.
Who is he? So really, it was humbling. I became completely anonymous from one day to the next, like all of a sudden, and I think that question is very personal, and I'd love to answer it on a more personal level because it's
I mean, but it's already insightful.
I think this is where it becomes interesting. First,
I mean, the humbling nature of it is both not surprising, but is also like gratifying to hear, because I suspect the next part of that is from humbled to now maybe this is me having the guy who has multiple times reinvented himself and is reinventing himself once again here behind this thing, right? So like the humbled maybe then propels you forward and gives you a different sense of gratitude for what you now are building. I mean both building as a human, like this version of yourself, but then what you're now building as the firm, because you are kind of starting from scratch.
Yes. So first thing is, my wife was amazing in all this, because she's really one that supported me, that made me remain standing when things got tough, and really getting here and saying, I need to create a new identity for myself. This life presented me with the opportunity to create a new identity for myself as I was reaching my 50th birthday, and I took, again, very much guided by Anna, the opportunity to not redefine my identity around my work. And that is, I think, profound. I could have said, okay, now the narrative is that I'm this Mexican that builds bridges between Latin America and Spain, and that is doing climate, and that is me, And and by the way, I have an amazing track record in venture capital in Mexico, so you should listen to me because I've done this for many years. That was the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And I chose not to do that because I thought that would be repeating patterns and not really growing. And if I have something that has served me well, is and that I think you need in this industry is I have a growing mindset, and this was an opportunity for me to really grow as a person. And the difficult part when we reach this age is, how do I grow as a person? By defining an identity, by building an identity from scratch now that has to do more with that capacity to grow than by the picture that I can take of my professional life at any given moment. And that's part of the reason why I'm writing so much, because that's helping me make this more fluid um, kind of identity in changing, more complex, many more dimensions of who I am, and the professional keeps me more open because I don't know how I'm going to end. I started by saying Rumbo is going to be a bridge between Mexico and Spain, and now I'm doing a lot of business in Italy, and I'd
Yeah,
never done
right.
never done a deal in Italy before in my life, and life took me there. So is that changing my identity? No, because now I think the identity I'm trying to build about myself is I'm that change.
I love that.
I'm
I
fluent.
love that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told you this privately a couple times. It's arguably what led to this conversation. Is maybe this is the writer in me as well. Like I can feel what you just described about how you're processing this transition for yourself. I've literally felt that in some of your essays. Like there's the topical relevance, and it's fascinating, and the things that you dive into and the breadth of things that you write about is fascinating to me because I'm a curious person by nature. But now I'll be 57 in a couple of weeks. And as someone who, I famously in my little circle, I sold, donated, or trashed my entire life in Southern California about 10 years ago. And at 47-ish years old, I packed a suitcase and 2 backpacks and I went to Latin America for basically
Yes.
a decade. Right.
Yes.
And my daughter, maybe you'll appreciate this. My daughter there was a kind of a catalytic moment in my own personal life during that journey where one night I came home from a board meeting, disgruntled, upset, angry, had probably mollified myself with too much wine back in those days when I drank. And my daughter happened to be home from university for a weekend for some odd reason. And so I woke her up when I came in at like 2 a.m, stumbling around, angry about the world. And she comes out and she just looks at me. And keep in mind, this is the girl that I had raised by myself. Her and I are exceptionally close from her like age 10 forward. Incredible now 31-year-old woman with my mother of my grandson. Like, so whole life story here. But in that moment, she looks at me and she calls me out, like no bullshit, in the middle of the night, dark. And she looks at me and she's like, "What's going on?" And I vent about a bunch of other people's problems, right? And she says, "Well, I don't give a shit about any of that, Dad. We're Ryans. And in the Ryan household, we don't have midlife crises. We have problems that we then figure out how to define them, and then we fix them and we create a better version of it. And if you're not happy with what's going on in your life, then you need to go out and you need to figure out a better version. Quit working with these guys, go do something different, and I'll support you whatever you do, but I'm not going to live inside this like you're going to make it into something that it's not." And I was like, wow.
Oh, yes.
Right? Okay, child
Those
that I
moments.
right?
Exactly.
I was like, okay, child that I created now spewing this back at me. So I share that with you just as encouragement for you,
No,
right? As you're
love
going through
it.
the journey.
Yeah,
And you are a smidge younger than I am, so you may have some experiences still to come. But I know I love your vulnerability and the honesty. And again, if anybody is listening, Fair is a prolific writer online, and you can find his writings. We'll give you all that at the end of the show. And it's both topical to the stuff he's working on, but also just reflections about life and the world we're in and how to navigate it. And I think it's humbly, I've enjoyed it, but I think it would be useful content for anybody to consume.
I'd love to. And related to that, part of what I've learned in this last 3 years is I see that I used to compartmentalize a lot in my life. Like I had my professional life, I had my life as a teacher, I had my life as a father, as a husband, and life doesn't work in silos. This is everything interconnected. And you might have seen when I start writing something, a reflection on institutions and what is happening in the US, and I end up talking about me and my conversion, because that's what I'm letting my mind do now.
Awesome.
Not being compartments, but really like what I'm living is I'm finding a lot of congruence and integrity in this moment of life, because I'm able to talk about my personal difficulties and my beautiful life, and talk about my Mexico and moving to Europe and climate and macroeconomics and venture and as different phases of a complex reality that I'm going through.
I mean,
I embrace it.
Mm-hmm. If this was literature, right? You were a complicated, complex, but wonderful character. right? I mean, so and that's
we'd
I mean,
be
that's the best we can hope to be, right?
exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
full of all these different pieces and components that can be consumed and dissected by different people for their reasons. But the truth is, like, you're a nuanced, like, full human being, and that's an awesome thing to be. And I'll postulate, and this will be our segue, I'll postulate that this evolution and this realization makes you a better investor, right? And so in that context, why don't you tell us how, if you do think it makes you a better investor, but then also, like, let's talk about Rumbo. Like, let's do the Rumbo commercial here.
Yes.
So I think the broader generalized person with a wider range of curiosities and experiences and self-reflection is the best investor. I think, because it's also, I think it's the best operator, it's the best executive, it's the best founder, et cetera.
Yes.
So I believe this sets you up to become the best version of yourself as an investor. And in that context, again, tell us about Rumbo, like, specifically. Yes. What is, how, the traditional metrics, like, how big is the fund? What is your thesis? What does your founder profile look like? All those things.
Yes. So we, and I say we because I partner with an Italian investor in Madrid. We are right now investing out of a $10 million, 10 million euro fund, a small fund, because we have to start somewhere. And this is again, has to do with the ego of the size of the funds I used to manage before, but also because of being out there in the market investing. For me, it was critical to be back in the market writing checks right away. So we were able to raise a small fund and start investing it. We've invested already in 13 companies within a year. So that goes fast. And now we're putting together a much larger, orders of magnitude larger fund, taking advantage of public money here in Europe. We are investing in Latin markets, that is Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, and Latin America.
Like, you stole one of my final questions at the end, was going to be like, how has Italy worked its way into Latin America? But now I think I know.
This is a complete
we're going with the old definition of Latin.
Yes. I think ChatGPT helped me put together that. Like, how do I put it together?
Yes.
These are Latin markets. Okay.
Right.
Good.
Latin as in the old Roman Latin, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's funny.
So we're doing this geographic ensemble of countries. We are doing industrial decarbonization. So we're not doing any commercial B2C things. We're only doing B2B industrial within all these 7 sectors that I described. Early stage, with this unique composition. What I and this might be a little technical and boring, but what I think is, you have to build your thesis not based on how much money you really can raise, but really what problem are you solving in the market. And the problem with climate is that you have a very unique kind of entrepreneurs here. This is deep tech. Out of the 13 companies that I've invested in, 12 have PhDs launching companies around the technology that they developed on a lab.
Yeah, this is real science.
That wasn't happening in Latin America.
Yeah,
this is real
science. Yeah.
So they faced 3 problems, and we designed the fund around those 3 problems. The first is what they call climate capital stack. That is, how do you finance these things? And you don't finance them through a series of successive venture capital rounds, because first you need some venture capital, but then you need to build a factory, and then you need to build 10 factories, and it becomes orders of magnitude larger in terms of requirements. But it's hard. It's capex. It's you're building bricks. So you need to be able to finance in different ways. You need venture capital, but also you need some private equity. You need some structured finance, debt, project finance, and so on. So that I bring to the table because I've done it before, and it's very rare to find a venture capitalist that has done project finance. So
yeah,
hopefully that's something that this PhD that is coming out of a lab in Cambridge University finds that, oh, really, you know how to help me on this. Oh, then I want you in. Then my partner has been an entrepreneur from zero to IPO twice. So a real operator. And when you have these scientists and they have never hired 30 sales representatives within a month and have never, this kind of challenges of a scale up, and you can help them on that you're really adding value.
That's awesome. And that's
third,
sorry to interrupt, what a great profile too, right? Finance guy / operator guy. I mean,
Yeah. And then we built everything around our relationship with corporates. Because when you're doing this kind of things, in the traditional venture capital that I used to do, you are always going against the incumbent. You're like, I'm going to go take my road and I'm going to destroy the incumbent. But in B2B, you really have to collaborate with the incumbent, with the industrial guy. You need to create pilots with them. You need to create commercial plans. You need to have supply chain agreements and so on. So we have built both our LP base and our sort of support around corporates in Europe. So whenever we invest with you, we are going to get you to the corporates in order to help you scale. And fourth, because we're international, because you have an Italian and a Mexican in Spain, and we help you internationalize. In Europe, it's essential, just because of the size of the markets. If you're launching a company in Switzerland, you really have to get out of Switzerland very fast. So you need somebody that really helps you internationalize.
And that does give you a personal bridge kind of back to the South America, Mexico, Latin American markets in the traditional sense of the word, right?
Exactly.
Because those are all markets that are craving innovation and craving new science innovation, new technologies, and they're all chasing the same problem. So that's awesome. We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Chisos Capital. Everyone knows that raising capital is hard. And frankly, finding the next pool of entrepreneurs to get access to as limited investors is sometimes impossible too. Do you have a big idea, a dream you're building, but you're struggling to find early funding? Well, Chisos is changing the game for founders, creators, athletes, and investors. Whether you're launching a startup, growing your creative brand, or training for the big leagues, Chisos backs you. Chisos uniquely invests up to $100,000 in people, not just products, whether they be entrepreneurs, creators, or even athletes. With their unique CISA model, convertible income share agreements, founders get flexible funding without giving up equity or ownership, and investors get attractive returns and great upside with less risk. Chisos works for both investors and the people bringing our world to life. If you're seeking access to a truly diverse pool of deals, or you're someone who feels overlooked by the VC game, Chisos is ready to back you. So apply now at chisos.io. Your wonderful podcast guest in this sense today that you've literally just helped me skip ahead like 2 questions because you just answered a couple questions. So I'm going to just state it for the record because this was a big curiosity of mine. So I now understand that the climate investing universe, the ecosystem of it just seems to be so much more collaborative and so much more kind of multi-jurisdictional, so to speak, where it's investors, it's institutions, it's governments, it's universities, it's corporates, it's all of you are kind of playing in this a little bit differently than generalized kind of broad-based VC in the.
But let me make a reflection here. Doesn't it remind you of VC in the 80s and 90s?
I was just going to say, it sounds like VC in the 70s. Like, I mean,
or in the 70s.
100% true. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Right. We'll look back 50 years from now when we're reflecting on 100 years of private capital, and we'll realize that there was a really unhealthy artificial bubble period that lasted about 20, 25 years that was stuck in the middle of it, in which everybody thought that the rules that got written there were actually the rules. And it's like, this is not how this was. This wasn't. Yeah. And by the way, you two, like, even as I'm listening to your profile, like your profile of Rumbo, that sounds like every VC firm that was like an early days VC firm coming out of Silicon Valley in the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s. Like
that's a big compliment. That's what I tried to do. Yes,
right. And because everybody was like someone who understand finance, not necessarily structured finance like you, but like someone who understood the money, institutional money part, and then an operator who understood like how to run and build a company. Like, and then that the whole value was you were the mentors with money.
Yep. Yes, and that brings me to your other question, which is, given that I do think that this looks like the early ages of venture capital, let's go back to to fundamentals on everything. How do
Yes.
how do I choose an entrepreneur? What am I looking for in a company? I'm going back to fundamentals,
Good for you.
and I really make the effort of saying, what are the fundamentals here? What is what I'm looking
for
for?
you.
I don't want, or I don't necessarily want a guy that has learned the YC playbook and that knows.
Yeah.
I
And that's
want
not
fundamentals.
right. And it's not to say like God bless YC doing what they do. That's a
Yep.
part of an overall ecosystem. And
Yep.
I always sound like the old boomer when I say what I'm about to say, but right, like, hey man, it was 1998 and I raised $3 million of venture capital in Southern California, and I never stood on a stage. I never did a fast anything. I never had a speed anything. I never was in anything that was called a pitch competition or any of that stuff. And you know what we did? My partner and I, the salesy business development guy and the engineering smart guy, we sat at a boardroom table with I'll say this because it was Southern California, like a bunch of old white dudes, right? It was a bunch of old rich white dudes. And we sat at a boardroom table one night for 5 hours, and we handed out and put around each chair on the table a stacked, like 25-page business plan that was bound together at Kinko's, right? And then we had to pay for dinner, and we all sat there as they ate their steaks, and they asked us every possible question you could imagine about the business, about the industry, about ourselves for 5 hours. And that was how, and then we did follow up for that for a couple of weeks, and that was how we raised money. And I'm like, people are like, well, yeah, that's not how it is anymore. I'm like, but it doesn't have to, it could be that. It could be like sitting down for a meal with someone who you're prospectively investing in and getting to know them over multiple visits, over multiple hours. It doesn't have to be this digitized, fake it till you make it kind of.
And I've thought a lot about exactly what you're saying. And yes, we might be perceived as boomers, both you and I, but we've done the other thing. I've invested in companies that are super hyped,
yes.
and I do get it. I know how to play that game. I really know how to play that game.
You
but
do.
I don't want to play games anymore. I want to become a long-term good investor. You know what I mean? And I'm consciously saying, okay, that game, not what I'm gonna be the best at.
Good for you
today.
Good for you.
But
and
I
hey,
can
man,
make.
sorry, as we head forward into a world of AI and hyper digitization and automating the humanity out of everything, I'll make a case for you for Rumbo, and I make this case about Hollywood. I make this case about storytelling. I make this case about industry. Like, I'll make a case that there will be a tremendous opportunity for differentiation in becoming the slow-moving, thoughtful, patient capital, right? Partners that are there for the long term, that actually do want to sit down and have some wine and break bread together and get to know their family and share some pasta in Italy and all. All of a sudden you will become, yes, you're still leveraging the technologies to run your firm efficiently. Yes, you're still going to use the technologies that are available to you and your firm to be able to vet, investments and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like, all of a sudden you will be the firm that isn't the hyper blitzscaling, chasing this, chasing that firm. And there will be founders who will go, oh my God, I can't believe we found you guys. Thank you.
Exactly.
Like, you're more like us. Like, we don't necessarily fit in that race over there. I don't want to run the race.
Yeah. And absolutely. And thanks for that. And I don't think there's necessarily a trade-off in terms of returns with one approach versus the other.
Well, and ultimately that's literally your business. So ultimately time will tell. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. That's your job to convince your limited partners and institutions. All right. I have a couple of kind of shorter questions before we get to our closing segment question, which is always a little bit different, but these are a couple of curiosities, and we don't have to go deep into them, but I am curious, and I do want your insights while I'm privileged enough to have you today. So you are leaning into, at Rumbo, like, you're literally leaning into the standards and best practices of good ESG investment models. Like, you're not shying away from that. It's right there on your
Europe,
website,
which is even more regulated.
Right. I mean, but you're doing this at a time when, obviously we've alluded to it a few times, and I could make every podcast now in my life about the political climate in the US, but I'm not going to do that. But, what happens in US governance and how they push back against certain things does ripple out into the world, right? And so we're living in a moment right now where the US federal government is overtly trying to eliminate everything that has an acronym that means anything, right? So they're trying to kill off all these ESG things. They're trying to abandon those principles. Does what is happening in the U.S. and its ripple effects, does that have any does it complicate your work in Europe, or has it again given you an opportunity to set yourself apart in a differentiated way that's positive?
No, that's a very good question, and so I have seen both. For once, Europe is very aware that Europe has gone a little too far in regulating things, and now they want to correct because they do want to regain competitiveness, and some extra bureaucracy and extra red tape that doesn't add value subtracts competitiveness, and Europe is aware of it. So it's coming back to a revision of what are they trying to regulate for. Um, and what they are seeing in the US is making them be more questioning their own regulation in terms of ESG. But and that is good because it's changing things for the better. But at the same time, they're saying yes, but within what we really want to achieve, and this is non-questionable. We do want to reach net zero, so the E is there. We do want to respect diversity and integration and the problem with migrants, and so the the social problem in Europe is not been moving away and saying, oh, we're gonna
Pretend
get
it doesn't
away
exist.
of any diversity policies or whatever.
Right.
And then we want the highest standards in governance. And those are positive things. We want better environmental practices. We want to take care of our society. We want to have good governance. Now, does that mean that we want extra costs for the financial instruments related to ESG? No, but we do. But we won't get what we want, what we don't measure. So let's revise how we measure ESG. And I completely align with that. We do want to be regulated with ESG. We just want to be regulated smartly in a way that it's not a cost, that it's a compliant because it aligns with the incentives of everybody. We do what we say we're going to do.
No, I love that. Right. Stand on principles.
Exactly.
Have a focus that says like more efficient ESG, like more effective ESG, like, and maybe there are both. And I think we're seeing it again. It's all being clouded by the nonsense that's going on in our federal government. But I do believe there is kind of a global like mirror that is happening in multiple different regions.
But ESG should have never been about compliance. It should have always been about aligning for a mission.
I mean, but hey, fair climate shouldn't have been about saving the planet. It should have been about saving the species. So,
exactly.
so what we're learning is we are terribly bad storytellers, right?
Yes,
we're terribly bad marketers. Which, all right. So that's my last question before we get to the closing segment. Is I want to, because again, you're a prolific writer, and in that, whether you think you are or not, you are a storyteller. You are telling stories.
Yes.
And I think we both agree, and we both understand the fundamental importance of storytelling to entrepreneurs or as investors, right? I imagine you've probably told 100 portfolio founders, like, I don't care if you don't think you're a sales guy, you're a sales guy. Like you have to everybody is selling something, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, if venture capital, kind of in the venture capital fueled innovation world, is a storytelling business, what do you think the story about Latin America is today? And then what do you think the global investors are kind of still getting wrong about that story?
I think we're lacking imagination in revising our story. I think the story for venture capital in Latin America has become a little old, hasn't adapted to what I'm seeing as reality in the world, and cannot be only dependent on a few success cases and how dynamic and young the population is, and how much of a catch-up we need to have. I would love to see a refreshed storytelling there, and I'd love to participate on that because I think we made a lot of smart moves and stupid mistakes 10 years ago, and now we come with a new story, or we are just a marginal player in what we're seeing today, and that's my biggest concern, that we might feel grandiose
Yeah.
and see the importance of Latin America and Mexico and all everything that we've discussed. But at the end, do large institutional investors really
Right.
care about that? Is it fundamental for them to invest in technology in Latin America or not?
Boy,
And that has to be
there's a
solved.
pointed way to ask
Yeah,
it, right? I mean,
yeah,
right there. Like, I mean, is
yeah,
it because as you alluded to earlier in the Silicon Valley example, the Sand Hill Road
yeah,
story, right?
yeah.
Is this idea of like, unless you're giving
Why?
me,
Why do
unless you,
I? Yeah,
right? Like, what is it that's differentiated? What is it that is true alpha? What is it that is unique that I am missing out on, and therefore I should have to. And I yeah no I'm kind of I haven't really thought about it until the way you expressed it, but there is a riskiness to over reliance upon that same old kind of tropey headline of, well, there's 700 million people down here, and they're, and it's a younger population, and there's lots of
yeah,
engineering talent, and like that doesn't necessarily. I mean, like again, it's 15-ish, almost maybe 17, 18, 19, 20 years old almost, right?
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
it's time for like what's the Latin America story 2025?
Exactly.
Right. And
Yes.
going forward. And
Yes.
and of course now you've also broadened Latin America to be much more inclusive of a number of different countries, right? So there's
Yeah.
an opportunity to tell that part of the story too. Because
Yeah.
by the way, although we're talking to you, I'll add context. Clearly, I mean, there's a running joke between me and many of my Mexican or South American friends who have retreated, I call it, and you'll take this with no offense, like retreated to Spain over the last 4, 5, 6, 8 years for a bunch
sure.
of different reasons. And I humbly refer to it as like the reverse colonization of the monarchy, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
it's the most like ironic reverse migration of all time in the history of broader context, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
there is an interesting opportunity to retell that story about those relationships in the current context economically of today's world, which is ever
No,
evolving.
for sure.
All right. Okay. Last question. This is closing
Yeah.
segment. So this one's a little bit more bullet point, kind of some actionable takeaways for our listeners. So this one we're going to aim at. We've talked a lot about investors. We've talked a lot about leadership. We've obviously talked a ton about Europe and kind of the relevance to the world. I want to make this last one for the founders, for the entrepreneurs that are listening, right? So whether we're going to talk Latin America in the South American / Western Hemisphere sense, or we're going to talk the broader old world, new world sense, give me 3 underrated or maybe misunderstood, but really important traits that Latin American founders need to develop in order to thrive today going forward. So I don't care about what the 3 traits that Latin American founders needed to have in 2016. What are 3 traits that Latin American founders need to have or develop in 2025 to thrive in 2035 and 2045?
Yeah, love it. Love your question. Let me see if I can express it rightly. I think successful entrepreneurs in Latin America today need to transmit, and this is about storytelling, the inevitability of their success so that people want to participate in that success. That's perhaps what I've seen in the most successful entrepreneurs in my career. It's, listen, this is going to be a huge success. This is going to be transformational with or without you. I just know that it's going to be without arrogance, just with that conviction that things are going to play out right. And it's not about, if only we had the money, if only the government in Mexico weren't that blah, blah, blah. If only, no, this is going to happen. And you really want to be part of this because see the changes that we are going to achieve as a community together. So it is this conviction and the inevitability. And I just wrote a piece about this that is related to a grandiose approach together as a community, not as a person. I'm not the big guy. This is not me. This is what is going to happen that I'm presenting to you. And I think I still need to think more about it in order to be more eloquent. But
I love that.
This is an idea that I have in my mind.
I mean, if we're talking about, hey, founders, hey, entrepreneurs, young or old, right? Like one of a few traits that you need to develop is this presentation and a sense of inevitability. That's a beautiful word, inevitability, because yes, it can be misperceived, it can be misconstrued, but then subtextually articulated the way that you did,
Yes.
it's very clear. Like inevitability is a again, I'm standing here in front of you to say, my team, us, we're going to lead the community, the collective we, to something better.
Yes.
And we'd love to have you be a part of it because we saw this about you. But if you don't want to be a part of it, like that's your choice. Like
yes.
you're lost because we're gonna go do it. That's not cocky. That's not like American hubris or Argentinian hubris. That's like somewhere just in like humble, smart.
I think so.
Inevitability. I love
I think
that.
so. I'd love to develop more of that idea because it's a recent thing that I've been thinking about, but along those lines, yeah.
Are there any other traits beyond inevitability?
And my just juxtaposition, I think we can become more vulnerable. You and I are having a vulnerable conversation, and then all of a sudden it became this playbook of how to be super successful. Everything is working out, and I think vulnerability connects people. And this, after everything we've talked about, technologies and trends and macro, this is still a people's business.
There you go.
This is all about people, and people connect through vulnerability.
That's it. We don't need a third one. Those two are amazing. Like if you can present yourself to the world of business, the economic opportunity with a sense of inevitability that is done smartly, respectfully, humbly, professionally, right? But then you can also come along with that humility, with that humbleness that comes with just being okay with showing who you are, be who you are, flawed, imperfect, own those things, take responsibility for yourself, for your actions, for your words, and then live up to that. I mean, now we're starting to sound like we're giving like my dad's advice that he used to give to me 100 years ago, right? This is awesome. Hey, I got to tell you, it sounds like a bustling house of amazing women and people behind you. So I'm going to free you to go enjoy your Friday night in Madrid. But this was an absolute pleasure. This conversation was everything that I hoped it would be, but also just frankly, everything that I kind of expected it would be.
Thanks so much. It's always been a pleasure. I've always admired your approach, your optimism, the way you always take a smile out of me with every comment you send me on Twitter, on LinkedIn. And this has been a joy.
I love it. Thank you. Hey, okay. So a little bit of business, make sure people can find you or follow you individually, or how do we find the firm? What are the websites, social media handles, all that stuff?
So the website is rumbo.ventures. But I'm writing more on Substack, as you said, with my name Ferlelo that I've used always in Twitter, Ferlelo in LinkedIn, and now you can see my articles in Substack.
Awesome. And I strongly encourage anybody who likes long form thinking. If you're listening to this podcast, I already know you like long form conversation. So if you like long form thinking, his essays that he shares on Substack are incredible. They're essentially, to me, they're like little written versions of what's going on in your mind that we just pulled some of it out into a podcast. So deeply, deeply grateful. Really appreciate you, buddy.
The same. Likewise. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Rob.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.